father was already back from the university, and his grandmother had arrived and installed herself in the kitchen, fussing over the few dishes at the sink and preparing food for no clear reason. She cornered Paul when she saw him and filled him in. Elliot hadn't been seen for days. He was last seen in Stark, the fishing town where he worked. His phone was going straight to messages as though it was switched off. Or he could be out of range, somewhere even further up the coast. He could be hurt, his grandmother said. Could have got himself into trouble on one of his surfing or fishing trips. Could have crashed his car or been washed off rocks by a king wave. His grandmother clenched his wrist as she said these things, not really looking at him. Then she let him go, returning to her post behind the kitchen counter to scowl into a white plastic mixing bowl. Paul found his father upstairs in his study, still in his suit jacket. "Paul," his father said, and straightened his glasses. He was standing beside the wall-mounted bookshelf, leaning back on his heels. He held a large ring-bound document. "You know," his father said, leafing through it, "I met a student's grandfather today. We had morning tea for our doctoral grads, and this very good student of mine had brought along his family, including this grandfather. 92 years old. First time I ever saw the man. But then I remembered that the same man had died 6 years ago. 6 years ago I gave an assignment extension to this student because one Mr. Horsley, his grandfather, had died. But there today at this morning tea sat Mr. Horsley, definitely alive and in reasonable health." Paul's father smiled. "A miracle," he said, and ran a hand through his clipped blonde hair. As usual, Paul didn't know what to say to his father. He'd expected that maybe this one time the professor might even be angry, having to cancel a lecture, arriving home to bad news and patchy information. He'd expected that he might be aggravated by the unproductive fretting of Paul's grandmother, impatient with the whole thing, feeling all the same things Paul did. But the professor stood there in the study as absent-mindedly as a man standing in a park. "And I thought to myself," his father continued, "that is dedication. To be willing to do in your grandfather for a 1-week extension." "Elliot," Paul said. The word echoed darkly in the study. "Yes," his father replied. "Your mother is making calls." Paul waited for more, but that was all his father said on it. "Where is Mum?" Paul said. "Maybe try his room." Paul waited a moment longer, watched his father's back, turned to the door. "Paul," his father called after him, removing his reading glasses. "Yeah?" "I don't like you going on my computer. You know that. I have a lot of work on here. I can't afford to lose it." He didn't answer as he left the room. Paul's mother spent the afternoon in Elliot's bedroom on the phone. She tried to call Tess, Elliot's girlfriend, who had first reported him missing, but she didn't answer. She spoke to the police in Stark and the city police. An officer told her they would send someone out to see them. It wasn't like Elliot. Paul's mother repeated that phrase a number of times on the phone with people, to Elliot's small circle of friends and their parents, in the phone calls from his Auntie Ruth, and to the dozens of other concerned or curious people who phoned, some of whom she hadn't seen in years. And she would repeat it to herself. "It's not like him." And it wasn't. Elliot called regularly. Even when he was on his trips up the coast, he'd always been clear about when he was coming home. Paul didn't think of Elliot as secretive. He was reclusive, but not shady. But no one knew where he had been for 3 days. Paul's grandmother suggested the possibility of an accident, that Elliot might have run off the road somewhere in a place that would conceal the car, hidden behind a wall of trees, or deep in desert bush. In the course of the afternoon, she became convinced of the scenario and suggested that she set off and begin a search of the country roads. Paul's mother found the idea simultaneously irritating and overwhelming, and ordered her to stay until the police arrived. She said it was unlikely that Elliot could have left the road without a trace. Paul's grandmother went quiet, as if suddenly realising the practical dilemma posed by the theory. 700 kilometres of looking for brake marks on worn highways, of searching the roadside bush north of the city, and the infinite maze of 4-wheel drive trails between Perth and Stark, and all those barren stretches of coast and beaches that didn't have names. And Paul suddenly understood the power of losing someone, just how big it made the world seem, so impossibly endless and silent and indifferent, and how small it made you feel.